No one ever expected to see a dog, much less a K-9 officer diving through the deep blue ocean, cutting through the current like a torpedo. But there he was. A brown and black German shepherd, lean and powerful, his tactical vest marked K-9, unit strapped to his muscular frame, swimming with single-minded intensity toward something no one else could see. There were no humans in sight, no boats, no screams. Just endless water and silence, pierced only by the subtle hum of currents and the occasional flash of silver as fish darted away. The dog's eyes were wide with urgency, not panic, but purpose. Something was out there. Something that couldn't. Cry for help. Rocky, that was his name. Not many K-9s got assignments like this, but Rocky wasn't like most dogs. He was trained for disaster rescue, scent tracking, and tactical support. But this time he wasn't waiting for a handler's command. This time, instinct took over. 30 feet below the surface, the light filtered in broken shafts, slicing through the water like holy beams. Rocky dove deeper, bubbles trailing from his snout. The deeper he went, the more the world around him changed. Quieter, colder, more still. At first it looked like driftwood, dark, misshapen, and unmoving. But then the light hit it. A stroller. Baby stroller. Half sunk into the seabed, swaying gently with the current like a forgotten relic. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a place where families walked with babies. This was open water. And then Rocky saw it. A small barefoot inside the stroller. A baby. Still. Motionless. Time stopped. Even for a dog trained to face death. He kicked hard with his hind legs, darting toward the stroller like a missile. His instincts roared. This baby was still alive. Somewhere deep inside, Rocky could sense it. A faint flutter, a warmth not yet gone, the kind of signal no human ear or sonar could detect, but that a dog's heart would never miss. He reached the stroller, pushed his snout under the canopy, and saw a sight that would have shattered a grown man's heart. The baby, no older than 6 months, lay strapped in with seaweed clinging to its clothes, tiny fists clenched, lips slightly parted, and the eyes, barely open, held that flicker of life. Rocky barked, a muffled echo in the water, bubbles bursting from his jaws. He needed to act. Fast. The stroller's wheels were jammed in the ocean floor. One of the buckles was tangled in, a piece of fishing net, making it impossible to lift the whole thing at once. He began to pull at the net with his teeth, yanking, tearing, fighting as the seconds vanished like air bubbles. A moment here to pause. If you're moved by what Rocky is doing, subscribe to Heroes for Animals. Every week, we bring you true and fictionalized stories inspired by real animal heroes like Rocky. Animals who risk everything for those who can't protect themselves. Now, back to the moment. Rocky yanked the net free and gripped the metal frame of the stroller between his jaws. It was heavy. He wasn't supposed to carry this kind of weight, but he didn't care. He turned upward and kicked, each movement a defiance of physics and fate. Up, 20 feet, then 10. And just when he thought he wouldn't make it, his paws broke the surface. The sun exploded above. A gasp of warm air met the baby's face. Rocky kept paddling, supporting the stroller as best he could. The baby coughed. Once, twice, then cried. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. A Coast Guard drone that had been deployed minutes earlier caught the signal from Rocky's vest. A GPS beacon activated the moment he dove. Within moments, a rescue boat closed in from the northeast. The medics lifted the baby gently from the soaked stroller, wrapping it in emergency thermal blankets and pumping oxygen into its lungs. One of them whispered under his breath, "How the hell did this dog even find her?" No one had an answer. Not yet. But it wasn't just luck. Rocky had followed a trail no human nose could sense. Something imprinted in the baby's scent. Something the sea hadn't yet washed away. And somewhere in Rocky's memory he knew this baby. She wasn't just any child, but that's a truth we're not ready to reveal yet. Not in part 1. Back at the dock, news crews gathered. Everyone wanted to know how a canine dog ended up performing a deep-sea rescue. Social media lit up like wildfire. Canine saves drowning baby. German Shepherd dives into ocean, returns with infant. Miracle dog performs underwater rescue. But Rocky didn't care about headlines. He sat quietly on the pier, water dripping from his coat, eyes fixed on the baby as paramedics wheeled her into the ambulance. He watched until the sirens faded, then turned and looked at the sea. Something was still out there. Something the world hadn't seen yet. And Rocky wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The ambulance tore down the coast road, sirens wailing. The infant, wrapped tightly in heated blankets, her tiny chest now rising with rhythmic breaths. A paramedic monitored her vitals with laser focus, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't stop thinking about the dog. The dog wasn't even assigned to this case. Back at the marina, the commander of the local search and rescue unit stood, with his hands on his hips, replaying body cam footage from Rocky's GPS-enabled vest. The angle was choppy, water distorted, but the visual was unmistakable. A lone canine diving, locating and retrieving a baby from the ocean floor. "This doesn't make any sense," the commander muttered. Beside him, Officer Jamie Brooks, Rocky's handler, approached, face pale and jaw clenched. She was still soaked to the bone, her boots sloshing as she walked. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the aftershock of what had just happened. She wasn't even supposed to be on shift. Rocky had broken from his kennel back at base. Somehow, the dog had triggered the auto-lock release and disappeared. A junior officer spotted him sprinting toward the shoreline and radioed it in, thinking it was a training error. Jamie had grabbed her keys and gone after him without even thinking. Now, watching the footage, she realized something terrifying. Rocky had known exactly where to go. She stared at the grainy underwater shot, his front paws paddling hard, the camera catching a flash of the stroller, the faint curve of the baby's arm. She looked up at her commanding officer. "I think someone meant for that baby to drown." His eyes narrowed. "Say that again?" She wasn't just floating out there by accident. The stroller was weighted down. There was a net tied to the frame. It wasn't debris. Someone anchored it. The commander rubbed his face. "That's a hell of an accusation." Jamie looked him dead in the eyes. "I'm not guessing. Rocky's nose doesn't lie." Later that day, at the county hospital's pediatric ICU, baby Jane Doe, as they were calling her until identification could be confirmed, lay asleep, tubes gently helping her breathe. Her condition was stable, miraculously. Aside from mild hypothermia and water in her lungs, she'd survived an experience no infant should ever endure. A nurse stepped out of the room to speak to the attending physician. "No ID. No missing person report. No DNA match on file," she whispered. "It's like she appeared out of nowhere." The doctor nodded. "Then she's lucky someone found her." "Not someone," the nurse replied. "Some dog." Meanwhile, back at the rescue station, Jamie crouched next to Rocky, who was now resting on a towel-lined floor. His ears twitched occasionally, but his body remained still, drained from the exertion but alert. "You smelled her, didn't you?" she whispered. Before anyone knew she was there, she held out a small patch of cloth recovered from the stroller, a piece of pink cotton, maybe from a onesie or a blanket. Rocky sniffed it, then looked at Jamie with a deep, unreadable gaze. It was as if he recognized her, not the cloth, the child. They didn't wait long. The next day, an anonymous tip came into local police. A call from a blocked number, male voice, shaky. "I saw something. Near the docks. Someone pushing a stroller into the water." The call ended before dispatch could trace it. Investigators headed to the area. Divers confirmed the presence of a submerged stroller frame, netting, and anchor weights. just like Jamie had described. It was no accident. Now it was attempted murder. A baby no one could identify. A crime with no suspect. And a dog who somehow knew exactly where to look. Jamie sat in her patrol car later that night, replaying the moment Rocky had broken loose. She remembered how he had barked like mad in the kennel, pacing, scratching, whining. She hadn't thought much of it, maybe a storm coming or another dog in heat. But now, what if Rocky had sensed it from the beginning? Some dogs could detect earthquakes before they hit. Others could sniff out cancer cells. K9s were trained to find cadavers, narcotics, weapons. What if Rocky had sensed fear, or worse, despair? The news spread fast. By the end of the day, Rocky had gone viral. Miracle Dog saves infant in underwater rescue. K9 breaks free to find abandoned baby, hailed as a hero. Baby found alive after dog leads police to ocean clue. Social media erupted. Hashtags like $Hero K9, Rocky Rescue, and Miracle Baby trended nationwide. Thousands of viewers flocked to the Heroes for Animals channel, where a short highlight reel of the rescue had just been uploaded. In the video, viewers watched Rocky leap into the water, disappearing into the unknown, then resurfacing minutes later, pulling with all his might until the baby's form could be seen through the foam. Tears. Cheers. Shock. The internet was in awe. But the deeper story hadn't been told yet. The following morning, Jamie got a call from an elderly woman named Mrs. Halligan, a retired librarian in her 80s. "I saw the news," she said, voice trembling. "That baby, she looks just like my granddaughter did when she was born. Same ears, same birthmark on the shoulder." Jamie's heart pounded. "Ma'am, do you know where your granddaughter is now?" A pause. "She was adopted, against my wishes, 25 years ago, by a woman I never trusted. Her name was Diane Greaves." Jamie froze. Diane Greaves, a name that had surfaced once before, on a closed CPS report involving child neglect, years ago, never charged, no record since. What happened to her? "I haven't heard from her in years," the old woman said. "But I saw a stroller like that outside her apartment complex last week." Jamie hung up and looked at Rocky. "We're not done," she whispered. Rocky tilted his head. That same fire, low and burning, lit in his eyes. Back at the hospital, the baby's room remained under light security. Nurses took turns, standing guard while social workers scrambled to determine custody. No family had come forward. No one had claimed her. But Jamie had a gut feeling. This wasn't the first time Diane Greaves had been involved in something shady. She pulled up the address and grabbed her jacket. "Rocky," she said. The dog stood back straight, tail stiff. The mission wasn't over. Jamie Brooks had knocked on hundreds of doors in her career. Drunk and disorderly, missing persons, custody disputes. Each knock came with a little uncertainty. But this door was different. Apartment 4B, an old building at the edge of town where stucco peeled from the siding and rust stained the stairwell like dried blood. She didn't come alone. Rocky stood beside her, his tail straight, ears perked, nose twitching in short, sharp motions. He'd led her here without hesitation. The moment they turned down the street, his body tensed like a loaded spring. "Easy," Jamie whispered, her hand gently stroking the soft patch behind his ears. But Rocky didn't move his eyes from the door. He knew something waited behind it. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. "Police." Still nothing. Jamie exchanged a glance with the officer beside her and gave a subtle nod. The second officer moved to the side window while Jamie reached for the door handle. Locked. But just as she turned back, Rocky let out a deep, guttural growl, low and vibrating. Jamie froze. She'd only heard that sound a handful of times before. Once when he cornered a suspect armed with a knife. Another time during a house search where a child was hiding under floorboards. It wasn't just a warning. It was instinct. She pulled her weapon, stepped back, and kicked the door in. The apartment stank of mildew and burnt plastic. Blinds hung like torn ribbons. A half-eaten tray of food rotted on the table. Trash lined the hallway like breadcrumbs. But the thing that chilled Jamie wasn't the mess. It was the silence. Rocky surged forward, sniffing rapidly, then darted left into the bedroom. Jamie followed, weapon raised. The room was nearly empty. No bed, no dresser. Just a thin mattress. On the floor, surrounded by unopened diaper packs and a dirty baby bottle tipped on its side. Then something caught her eye. A wall, covered with pictures. Hundreds of printed photos taped in overlapping layers. Most were of children, toddlers, babies, faces, smiling or blurred in motion. In the center was a larger photo. The baby from the stroller. Same onesie, same cheeks. A red string bracelet on the wrist. Written below it, scrawled in marker. "She is not yours." Jamie's pulse quickened. "Clear." "The back," she called out. The officer's voice echoed from behind the kitchen. "No one here," but Rocky wasn't so sure. He began pawing at a floor vent, digging, whining. Jamie knelt beside him. The screws were missing. She pried the metal grill free, and there, inside the narrow duct, was a piece of fabric, pink cotton. The same pattern as the scrap found underwater. Jamie's breath caught. This was the place. By noon, forensics had arrived. The apartment was sealed off, evidence tagged and photographed. But something gnawed at Jamie. The woman was gone, disappeared without a trace. Jamie drove to the hospital and climbed the stairs to the pediatric ICU. The baby, now nicknamed Hope by nurses, was asleep, her tiny fingers wrapped around a soft plush sheep someone had left. Jamie stood quietly at the glass, arms crossed. "You shouldn't get attached," said a voice behind her. It was Dr. Ellis, the pediatric attending. Kids in the system don't always land softly. Jamie didn't respond. She knew he was right. But this felt different. Hope wasn't just a victim. She was a target, and Rocky, he hadn't found her by accident. "Do you think dogs can remember people they've never met?" Jamie asked. Ellis raised an eyebrow. "You mean like reincarnation?" "No, I mean, maybe someone that dog cared about before. Someone who vanished or something left behind." "You think he knew her?" Jamie nodded slowly. "Or someone like her." That night, Jamie brought Rocky home for the first time in weeks. The K9 kennel was safe but impersonal. Rocky was family. She laid out his old blanket by the fireplace and dropped a beef bone into his dish. He didn't touch it. Instead, he walked to the back door and sat, eyes locked on the darkness outside. "You think she'll come back?" Jamie asked softly. Rocky let out a short bark. One. Then silence. Jamie leaned against the wall, arms folded. A storm was coming. She could feel it in her knees, the same way her mother once did. The next morning, a call came in from dispatch. Possible sighting of Diane Greaves. The woman had been seen entering a soup kitchen in a neighboring town 2 hours away. Jamie didn't hesitate. She loaded Rocky into the SUV and sped down the highway, heart pounding. The place was quiet when they arrived. Just a few volunteers and a handful of unhoused patrons eating pancakes and sipping watered-down coffee. Jamie showed the photo. One volunteer pointed to the back room. She came through, said she was looking for someone, looked strung out. Jamie moved fast, Rocky beside her. In the alley out back, they spotted her, disheveled, twitchy, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "Diane Greaves," Jamie shouted. "Police!" The woman turned to run, but Rocky was faster. He bounded forward, curved around her, and stood directly in her path, barking, growling, teeth bared. She stopped cold, raised her hands, sank to her knees. In the interrogation room, Diane refused to speak for the first hour. Then, under the pressure of Rocky's presence and a gentle nudge from Jamie, she broke. "She wasn't mine," she whispered. I was supposed to deliver her. To who? Diane shook her head. I don't know, I never got their name, just a number, cash up front. Told me to bring her to the pier. Jamie's stomach dropped. You were selling her? She wasn't even registered, Diane snapped. No one knew she existed. Jamie's voice dropped to a growl. But someone did. And they wanted her gone. Diane crumpled. It wasn't I was just desperate. I didn't think the stroller would sink that fast. Jamie stood, fist clenched. You left a baby to die. Diane looked up, eyes wet. But she didn't. Her gaze shifted to Rocky. It was him, wasn't it? The dog. He saved her. Jamie didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the world slowed down, Jamie stood in Hope's hospital room once more. The baby stirred. Eyes opened, and for a brief moment, just a second, she looked not at Jamie, but at Rocky, who stood quietly at the foot of her bed. She smiled. Not a baby's reflexive twitch, but a real, tiny, knowing smile. Jamie's chest. She knew now, this wasn't over. Whatever Hope was running from, whatever darkness had tried to swallow her whole, it hadn't given up yet. But neither had they. Not Rocky. Not Jamie. Not anymore. The world outside the hospital buzzed with headlines, hashtags, and morning show interviews. But inside room 214 of St. Clair's pediatric ICU, time stood still. Hope, the name the nurses had given her, lay tucked under a warm flannel blanket with cartoon sheep dancing across it. She was breathing easier now. Color had returned to her cheeks. But her name wasn't Hope. Not really. Jamie Brooks sat by the window, a styrofoam cup of gas station coffee cooling in her hands. Rocky rested beside her chair, his head on her boot, eyes half shut but ears twitching at every hallway footstep. 2 days had passed since Diane Greaves had been arrested. 2 days, and still no one had come forward to claim the baby. No family. No parent, no neighbor calling the station. It didn't add up. Someone had tried to erase this child, and they'd almost succeeded, if not for Rocky. Jamie sipped her coffee and stared at the digital ID tag hanging from Hope's wrist. Female, unknown, 6 to 8 months, found near Bay Pier. Such a cold way to describe a miracle. Detective Reuben Glass was one of those seasoned cops who never got rattled. He was big on facts and allergic to theories without paperwork. So when he knocked on Jamie's office door that morning, his face told her this wasn't going to be a social visit. We got something from the lab, he said, stepping inside, and closing the door. Jamie straightened in her chair. Talk to me. DNA match. Maternal line. He handed her the folder. The baby's mother's name is Emily Denvers, registered missing 18 months ago. Jamie blinked. Wait, Emily Denvers? Wasn't she that teen from the group home? Reuben nodded. 17 years old. Vanished without a trace. Family had no contact. Case went cold after 6 months. And now her daughter shows up in the ocean, Jamie said, her voice low. Not just that. Reuben paused, lips pressed together. Emily's body was found last year, half buried behind a gas station outside county lines. Jane Doe until now. Jamie swallowed hard. Cause of death? Overdose. Heroin. But there were bruises, fresh ones, and signs of childbirth. Meaning the baby was born before she died? Reuben nodded. Jamie stood gripping the edge of her desk. Her knuckles went white. So someone took the baby, from a teenage girl, let her die, then tried to kill the child later. And covered their tracks for over a year. Jamie looked down at Rocky, who had perked up as if he understood every word. This isn't over. That night, Jamie took a drive. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not her captain, not the shift supervisor, not even Reuben. She just loaded Rocky into the SUV and headed west, toward the group home where Emily Denvers had once lived. The place sat just outside the county line, tucked behind an old church and a chain-link fence patched with zip ties. The sign out front read, Hollow Ridge Youth Center, but the building itself looked tired. Weeds crept through cracks in the sidewalk. The front porch sagged in the middle like a tired back. Jamie parked and stepped out. Rocky followed, tail stiff. Inside, the smell hit her first. Bleach and old furniture. The lobby was dim, lit by a single overhead bulb. A tired-looking woman in a fleece vest sat behind the desk. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. Jamie showed her badge. "I need to ask you a few questions about a former resident, Emily Denvers." The woman froze. "Emily," she said. "I haven't heard that name in a long time. Mind if I take a look around?" The woman hesitated. "We're not in trouble, are we?" "Not yet." Jamie walked slowly down the corridor of rooms, each one small, identical. A bed, a desk, a cracked mirror. All the signs of a place that called itself home but never really was. Rocky moved beside her like a shadow. At one point, he stopped at a door. Room 9. He sniffed once, twice, then pawed gently. Jamie opened it. The room was empty, but the walls were different. One side was painted with tiny flowers, hand-painted, faded but careful. Someone had tried to make it warm, human, real. Beneath the bed frame, Jamie found a hidden shoebox taped shut. Inside, a baby ultrasound, a photo of Emily holding her stomach, standing by a lake, a torn piece of paper with a number written in pencil, and a bracelet, red string, tied into a tiny knot, the same one Hope had worn in the photo at Diane's apartment. Jamie's throat closed. Back at the station, Jamie sat at her desk staring at the phone number. Reuben ran a trace. It belonged to a burner. No name, no call, logs after a specific date, the same day Emily had gone missing. But Rocky wouldn't stop pacing. He circled the office, whined, walked to the evidence locker and sat down. Jamie stared at him. "What are you trying to tell me?" Then she remembered. The fabric from the stroller. It was logged in the locker. She retrieved the bag, opened it, and held it out to him. Rocky sniffed, then walked straight to her cruiser. Jamie's heart jumped. "You want me to follow the scent?" he barked once. They drove for nearly 20 minutes, past neighborhoods, past farms, into the marshland near the bay. The roads thinned out. Houses became fewer. The sun dipped lower until it was just a thin orange ribbon at the horizon. Rocky suddenly growled. They were near the water again. Jamie pulled over and stepped out. Rocky leaped from the car and bolted toward a small, run-down boathouse. Jamie followed, hand on her holster. The place was falling apart, wood rotting, roof sagging. But inside, it was dry and not abandoned, blankets on the floor, cigarette butts, a half-eaten sandwich still fresh, and a notebook. Jamie opened it. Names, dates, payments. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a trafficking log. She called it in immediately. Backup arrived. Photos were taken. Forensics swept the place. But the names were fake. Numbers scrambled. No obvious trail. Still, one thing was clear. Whoever had taken Emily's baby hadn't stopped with her. Hope was one of many, and someone out there was still hunting. Jamie returned to the hospital that night, exhausted, but burning with purpose. She stood by Hope's bedside and whispered, "I know who you are now, and I swear they're never going to touch you again." Rocky sat at her side, eyes locked on the door like a soldier standing guard. They had saved Hope once, but they would have to do it again because the past was no longer buried, it was knocking. It started with a knock on the door, not loud, not urgent, just 2 quick taps. Jamie Brooks looked up from her couch half asleep. TV still flickering in the corner. It was just after midnight. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and the wind outside carried the occasional sound of a distant train. She froze. No one came to her house unannounced. Not this late. Not since the Hope case had gone public. Rocky stirred at her feet, ears up, body rigid. A low growl rose from his chest. Not barking. Not yet, but on edge. Jamie stood slowly and moved toward the front door. Her hand instinctively rested on her holster. She flipped the porch light on. No one was there. She opened the door cautiously. Just as she did, she noticed something on the welcome mat. A baby shoe. Pink, soaked with rain. Jamie looked left and right, but the street was empty. She picked up the shoe and closed the door, locking it behind her. Rocky didn't stop growling. The next morning, Jamie handed the shoe to the forensics team. It wasn't just any shoe. It matched the same brand and size found on Hope the day she was pulled from the water. "This was a warning," she said flatly. Detective Reuben Glass didn't disagree. "Someone knows we're closing in. Or they want us to stop." He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "We've stirred something ugly, Jamie. These aren't small-time operators. You don't keep a baby off the books for almost a year without help." Jamie folded her arms. "They're not just organized, they're confident." Reuben nodded. "Which makes them dangerous." Jamie returned to the hospital later that afternoon. Hope had made remarkable progress. Her lungs were stronger, her vitals stable. But something else had changed. She smiled now. A soft, genuine smile. Not random, not reflexive. And always, always when Rocky entered the room. The bond between the baby and the dog had deepened in ways no one could explain. When he lay at the foot of her crib, she would sleep soundly. When he left, she fussed. Nurses started calling him her guardian. Jamie didn't argue. Outside the hospital, a black SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running. Inside, a man in his 50s, clean-cut, expression unreadable, spoke into a small headset. "She's there, with the dog. Still no ID on the cop." A voice crackled back. "Not the cop. We want the baby." The man didn't flinch. "I'll wait for the window." Back at HQ, Jamie and Reuben stared at a map pinned to the board. Tangles of yarn, photos, addresses, phone records. At the center, Emily Denvers. And just beneath her, baby Hope. Jamie tapped the old group home photo. This place was the recruitment point. "Emily wasn't the first, Reuben. She's just the one we found." Reuben exhaled. "You think they've got more kids out there? I'd bet my badge on it." They had names from the logbook in the boathouse. Dozens. All first names. No last names. No ages. Just strange references like E-Lake, F-Nav, second. Jamie suspected it was code, dates, drop points, initials. But there was one entry that stood out. H. Shepard, N214, C return. Reuben read it aloud. Hope, Shepard, room 214. And C return? Jamie's stomach turned. They're planning to come back for her. That night, Jamie didn't leave the hospital. She stayed with Hope. Rocky stayed too. The nurses offered her a cot, but she refused. She sat in the recliner beside the crib, sidearm on her hip. Rocky curled under the chair. Hours passed. Wind howled outside. A janitor mopped the hallway. The world outside slowed to a whisper. Then the power flickered, once, twice. The emergency light snapped on with a hum. Jamie shot up. "Generator?" she asked the nurse rushing past. "Whole block's down," the woman said, trying to stay calm. Could be the storm. Jamie didn't believe in coincidences. She pulled out her phone. No service. "Rocky," she said. The dog was already at the door, tail high, nose flared. He barked once. Then bolted. In the stairwell, a figure in black moved quietly. Steps measured. Hands gloved. He carried a duffel. Long. Narrow. Not medical. He moved with confidence like someone who'd done this before. As he reached the second floor, Rocky hit him like a missile. The man staggered backward, smashing into the wall, dropping the duffel. It clanged. Metal inside. Jamie rounded the corner seconds later, gun drawn, hands in the air. The man tried to reach into his coat. Rocky snarled and lunged again, this time locking onto the man's wrist. He screamed, fell to the floor, and didn't move again. Jamie cuffed him, eyes burning. "You picked the wrong kid." Back in the room, Hope slept through it all, untouched, safe. The hospital slowly returned to power. Cops swarmed the building. And the duffel, it contained a tranquilizer gun, duct tape, syringes. Whoever he wasn't planning to kill her. He was planning to take her alive. At the station, under heavy surveillance, the man finally spoke. His name was Colt Mercer, former private contractor, linked to black market adoptions overseas. He'd been paid $100,000 to retrieve Hope and deliver her to a third party via private plane from a nearby airstrip. Jamie's blood ran cold. "Who's the buyer?" Colt just smiled. "You can't stop it. The girl isn't just some orphan. She's worth more than you know." Jamie didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, hand resting on Rocky's back. "What did he mean?" she whispered. "Why? Is she worth more?" She pulled out the DNA report again. Something bothered her. Emily Denver's maternal line confirmed. But paternity, still undetermined. The sample had triggered a database alert. Not a match, but close. The name redacted under a federal seal. Jamie leaned back. "Who's the father?" Back at the hospital, Hope awoke in the morning to the sound of Rocky's tail thumping gently on the linoleum floor. She giggled. She was safe, for now, but far from free, because the people who wanted her weren't done, and whatever secret her blood carried, the world was about to find out. Jamie Brooks sat on the courthouse steps watching the early morning sun turn the stone gold. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours in the past 2 days, but her hands were steady, and her mind was razor sharp. The entire building behind her was buzzing with agents, reporters, and lawyers. Hope's case had become national, federal, political. What started as a baby pulled from the sea had become something far bigger, a question about power, secrecy, and what one child might represent. And one dog's instincts had set it all in motion. 3 days ago, the FBI finally cracked the redacted paternity file. Hope's father was Daniel R. Prescott, a wealthy defense contractor with deep ties to black-budget projects and classified medical programs. Prescott had died in a car crash 18 months ago, just weeks after Emily Denver's gave birth. But before his death, Prescott had been part of a clandestine research program involving genetic resilience markers, an attempt to identify inherited traits that could resist disease, trauma, even aging. Rumors said he'd used unauthorized trials, human ones. Hope wasn't just a child. She was the last trace of an illegal experiment, and someone had wanted her erased to cover it all up. Jamie had learned this the hard way. After arresting Colt Mercer, the private contractor, authorities discovered bank transactions connected to dummy shell companies. The money trail led back to a medical firm under review for ethics violations, but no charges had ever stuck. Until now. The courts were issuing subpoenas. Journalists were circling like hawks. A grand jury was assembling. And through it all, baby. Hope stayed quietly in her hospital crib, completely unaware that her very existence was changing the country's conversation about who gets to decide the value of a life. On her desk back at the precinct, Jamie placed a small folded note. It had arrived anonymously. Inside, a photograph of baby Hope smiling. On the back, 3 words. The world watched. No signature, no clue who sent it. But it chilled Jamie, because they were right. Hope had survived the ocean, a black market abduction, and the hands of people with too much power and no conscience. And through every chapter, someone was watching, not just those in the shadows, but people around the world. The video of Rocky's rescue had now surpassed 10 million views on Heroes for Animals. Comments poured in by the thousands. People called him America's guardian, the dog with a soul, the hero we didn't know we needed. But for Jamie, Rocky wasn't a symbol. He was family. 3 weeks later, Hope was released from the hospital. She was temporarily placed in protective foster care with Jamie's approval, while legal guardianship hearings began. Jamie visited every evening. Rocky came too. When Hope saw him, her arms would shoot up, and she'd squeal with delight. Jamie never tired of watching their bond, an unspoken understanding between child and canine. Some people said animals sense innocence. Jamie believed it went deeper. Rocky didn't just sense Hope's goodness, he had seen her pain. One night, as Jamie walked Rocky through the park, her phone buzzed. It was her captain. "You've got something in the mailroom." "Now?" she asked. "Trust me, you'll want to see it." She drove back to the station and opened the package herself. Inside was a letter typed in plain black font. "You stopped one. There are others. Look into Haventech, Project 601B, and follow the trucks leaving Building 4. She wasn't the only one born outside the law. They won't stop, neither should you. No signature, no return address. But there was a photo clipped to the corner, a grainy image, 3 infants, labeled A, B, and C. One of them was Hope. Jamie sat down slowly. Rocky padded up beside her and rested his head on her lap. "I think we just found the next piece," she whispered. The next day, Jamie met with federal agents and handed over everything, copies of the note, the image, the shipping label. She'd made up her mind. She was going deeper, not just to protect Hope, but to find the others, to stop this kind of thing from happening again. She'd seen what could grow from cruelty, but she'd also seen what courage looked like, in a baby barely old enough to cry, and a dog who refused to give up. 1 month later, the Heroes for Animals YouTube channel aired a special titled "The Canine Who Brought Down a Secret Empire." The documentary-style video recapped the entire journey: Rocky's dive into the ocean, the mystery of the abandoned baby, the discovery of Project 601B, and the arrests that followed. Jamie gave a rare on-camera interview. "He's more than a working dog," she said, petting Rocky, who sat stoically beside her. "He's a partner. And when I froze up, he moved. When I had doubts, he didn't. This story isn't about a miracle, it's about loyalty." The video ended with a shot of Hope giggling in her foster home, reaching out to Rocky. Her laughter played softly over the closing credits. Epilogue. Hope was eventually adopted, not by Jamie, though she tried, but by a retired pediatric nurse and her wife who lived on a quiet farm outside Denver. Hope thrived there, but Jamie never lost touch. And Rocky? He visited often. Though his official service ended after the incident, he remained on call. For Hope, always. At night, when Jamie sat by her fireplace and Rocky curled beside her, she sometimes thought about the day this all began. How a dog had broken out of his kennel without permission. How he'd jumped into the sea, and how, against all logic, he had found her. Maybe that's the thing about love and loyalty. You don't need a reason. You just follow your heart, and sometimes, your nose. Thank you for following Rocky and Hope's story. We know it's been emotional, intense, and at times, hard to believe. But sometimes real heroes walk on 4 legs. Let us ask you, if you had a chance to save someone you never met, would you follow the unknown? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true and inspired stories. We'll see you in the next one.